right, y'all, I'm gonna spill the tea. 6 people were murdered in Butler County, Alabama, and the sheriff's department knew exactly who did it, didn't arrest a soul. See, it all started when Watts Murphy's dad went to his house to visit him. And when he got there, Watts was nowhere to be found. Now, Watts, he's kind of loaded because he's from a very wealthy family, and his uncle was Governor Watts, the governor of Alabama. Of course, he was already dead by now, but that's beside the point. So anyway, Murphy's dad goes, and Murphy's not there, Watts Murphy. And so, like, his hands, his field hands are there, and they are working away, just doing their job. And Dad's like, "Where's my son?" And they're like, "Oh, well, he rode off on his mule a little while ago." Dad's like, "Okay, well, fine." And he leaves. Well, a couple of days go by, and nobody sees Watts Murphy. So Dad comes back, and he's like, "Nah, y'all did something to him." And they're like, "No, we didn't." Well, one of the hands was a man named Zeb. And Zeb had been with his family forever. Like, at least since he was a young teenager. He had lived with them and was actually the same age as Watts. And so, like, very close to the family, you would think. So Dad's like, come here, Zeb. You gotta tell me what happened. Now, we don't know exactly how this interrogation went, but I imagine it probably got pretty brutal at some point. And finally, Zeb says, yeah, this other guy that was with us, he hit him over the head with an axe. And then, so I'm sure they're asking, where's the body? So then he's like, well, we sent the mule off, tied his clothes to the mule and sent it off. And we burned the body. The body's been burned. So anyway, by now the mule had come back, and they knew the mule had come back. So they were saying, that's why they said that they had sent the mule off, and they couldn't explain the absence of a body, so they burn it. Well, of course they want to be shown, well, where did you burn the body? So they take them to like this wood pile, and there's no body there. But according to the news reports that came out later, they found nothing but the heart and the liver and a few teeth. Now, common sense tells you that heart and a liver are not going to survive, and the whole skull and skeleton be incinerated. It just doesn't even make sense. So they supposedly gathered up these few remnants and buried them somewhere. According to Find a Grave, like, they're now buried in the family cemetery, and that's a lie because this man's rich and all his rich family have headstones, but he doesn't. I digress. Anyway, this group of men who were all named, group of farmers from the local area, gather up the 6 people who worked for Watts Murphy. And they're going to take him all the way, or take them all the way from Butler Springs to Greenville. That's a pretty good distance. But instead of going straight to the main highway, for some reason they took an alternative route where they were mysteriously waylaid by 50 to 100 angry farmers out here in the middle of nowhere in a time when there's no like phone or internet. So somehow all of these farmers find out and come from, I guess, all over, and they take those 6 people and they try to hang them. One person escapes, so they hang 5 people, 3 young women and 2 young men. They put the men on one tree on one side of the road and the women on another tree on another side of the road, and they hang them. So the sheriff has already heard that there's trouble, and he's on his way. Supposedly, he doesn't make it in time for that, and by the time he gets there, they've already been hung, and somehow he must go the wrong way too, because he comes upon their bodies hanging, and so did the churchgoers the next morning on their way to church. What a sight, right? Well, anyway, long story short, the sheriff has no idea. He's like, no way to find out who did it. Nobody's seen anything. Nobody's saying anything. And yet all of the names of the people who were escorting them are in the newspaper. Of course they're the ones who did it, right? Of course they are. But apparently, Sheriff Barganier, he believes that 50 to 100 angry armed farmers said, you give us those prisoners now and you get out of here so we can mete justice out. But you haven't actually heard the really interesting part of the story yet. So fast forward less than a year later, probably about 10 months later, almost on the property of Watts Murphy, in what they called at the time, I think was 12 Mile Creek, but now I'm pretty sure it's Pine Barren. But anyway, somebody's walking down the road. Is that a skeleton floating in that creek? Wow, so everybody comes and checks out. Oh, he must be wealthy because he's got to be a white man. He's wearing nice clothes like only a prominent person would have. Oh, look, there's a wallet. There's papers in it, but they're ruined, so we don't know what they say. I wonder who this could be. Anybody missing a prominent person from this area? No? So the papers in Selma immediately say, hey, this is, and they mistakenly said King Murphy, which is Watts's brother. But the details they give of the disappearance are the same as Watts, and of course King is not dead. So but then immediately the Greenville newspaper comes back and says, oh, no, that was not him. First of all, King is alive, and second of all, it wasn't Watts either. His hands killed him and burned his body, and it was found and it was buried. But was it? Was it really? Or did we have to brush it under the rug because we realized that we hung 6 innocent people? And I say 6 because a couple of days after they hung the 5, they found the 6th man, took him back to the same spot and hung him too. But no, it can't be Watts. It can't be our missing Watts because he was murdered by those people we hung. Couldn't have been him. He couldn't have rode off on his donkey and got in an accident and drowned, been thrown, hit his head, something. So the man that they found, their theory was that he had been like at the water's edge under this pile of fence posts that had been there, and that some recent high rains had dislodged the body, the skeleton, and that's how it had finally come to be discovered. So, but no, it was said that it wasn't him. My theory is that Watts had an accident while he had his donkey trying to move some fence posts. Or he somehow was moving them and got trapped underneath them, or he never was trapped underneath them and that was just an incorrect theory and he actually drowned and the body just floated to the top when it did. But in any case, he wasn't murdered by the people who were said to have murdered him because they would have known that his body wasn't burned. They would have known where it was. So anyway, the locals denied that it was his body. They